On a seemingly happy birthday night, powerful boss Theron unexpectedly falls into a trap set by his own employee. Forced to choose between marrying a woman he does not love or facing prison, Theron seems to have no way out. But then, at the seemingly fateful wedding ceremony, a series of dark secrets from the bride's family are suddenly exposed, causing the entire hall to fall silent and Theron's life to take a completely different turn. What are those horrifying truths? And what will Theron do to turn things around? Theron Aldridge, a successful man, is known as one of the most powerful business owners in the city. With his talent and business vision, he has built a strong empire from scratch. Not only famous for his success in work, Theron also attracts attention with his handsome, elegant appearance, along with his calm and steadfast personality. He always knows how to run everything in his life perfectly, except for one thing that he never expected: being trapped in an unwanted marriage. Cressida, an employee under Theron, is a beautiful but calculating woman. Although she is just an ordinary employee in the company, she always cherishes the dream of climbing the social ladder by all means. With a cunning gaze, Cressida has long noticed Theron, not only because he is her boss, but also because of the power and huge assets he holds. For Cressida, this was her chance to escape her ordinary life and rise to a higher status. Cressida's plan began on a fateful day, when she decided to hold a birthday party at home and invited Theron to attend. For Theron, it was just a normal invitation from a company employee, nothing special. Little did he know that he was about to fall into a trap carefully orchestrated by Cressida and her family. The birthday night took place at a luxurious house that Cressida rented just to impress. Her friends and family were all present, creating a lively and bustling atmosphere. When Theron arrived, Cressida welcomed him warmly and acted extremely friendly. The party gradually became more fun, and Cressida kept offering Theron strong drinks. At first, he only drank a few glasses to be polite, but with the constant urging of Cressida and the crowd around him, Theron began to let his guard down and drank more than usual. The alcohol gradually entered his body, making Theron start to feel dizzy. The laughter and words around him became blurred in his mind. At this point, Cressida realized that the time had come. She gently led Theron to the bedroom upstairs, which had been arranged. In his drunken state, Theron could not clearly perceive what was going on. Cressida placed him on the bed and quietly left, leaving everything in darkness. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the window into the room, causing Theron to slowly wake up. His head was aching. Everything around him seemed blurry. When he opened his eyes completely, Theron realized that he was lying on the bed, without any clothes on, and this made him panic. He tried to remember what happened last night, but his mind was still confused by the drunkenness. At that moment, there was a knock on the door and Cressida and her parents entered the room. They stood in front of the bed, their eyes filled with criticism and anger. Cressida began to scream, pretending to be the victim of a terrible incident. Her parents quickly caught her red-handed and put pressure on Theron, accusing him of wrongdoing with their daughter. Cressida claimed that she was pregnant with Theron's child and threatened to sue him if he did not agree to marry her. Faced with this situation, Theron felt shocked and confused. He knew he had been deceived, but there was no evidence to prove otherwise. Cressida's parents continued to put pressure on him, claiming that if Theron did not marry Cressida, they would take the case to court and put him in jail. This would not only affect his reputation, but could also destroy the career he had built over the years. With no other choice, Theron is forced to accept Cressida's proposal, even though he has no feelings for her. From a powerful business owner, Theron now feels like he is trapped in a nightmare with no way out. After accepting Cressida's proposal, Theron gradually felt like he was falling into a bottomless pit. The wedding was approaching, but his heart was filled with doubts and insecurities. Not only did he feel uncomfortable being forced to marry a woman he didn't love, but there was also something about Cressida that made Theron feel uneasy. She always appeared overly confident, seemingly never worrying about the future. This made him start to question the pregnancy she claimed was his. During a tense evening, Theron sat in his home office thinking about everything. He recalled every detail of that birthday party, but the more he thought about it, the more he felt that something was wrong. Cressida, although always friendly and sweet in front of him, in hasty moments her eyes flashed with a cold calculation that he couldn't explain. Theron begins to suspect that she has planned everything. Unable to sit idly by, Theron decides to find out for sure. He secretly installs a recording device in Cressida's home, a decision he never expected to have to make. The device is hidden undetected, and Theron waits to hear what happens when he is not there. He hopes that he will find evidence that will help clarify the truth about Cressida and the pregnancy. As time passes, Theron's mood becomes more and more unstable. He feels like he is trapped in a game from which he cannot escape. With each passing day, the pressure from Cressida and her family grows. They pressure him to prepare for the wedding, leaving Theron almost caught in a spiral of helplessness. He cannot say no, but he also cannot accept what is happening. Theron's inner tension became more apparent as the wedding day approached. He did not want to marry Cressida, but the legal threat from her family left him with no other choice. He kept seeing Cressida smiling sweetly but coldly, as if she had won and Theron was just a pawn in her hands. Meanwhile, Cressida seemed increasingly carefree and relaxed. She often talked about wedding plans, inviting Theron to discuss small details like the color of the flowers or the menu for the wedding. But as time went on, Theron began to see the superficiality in Cressida's words. Although she seemed very interested in the wedding, she did not have any genuine feelings for him. This only made Theron more suspicious. One evening, while sitting in his study, Theron turned on the recording device and listened to the conversations taking place at Cressida's house. The conversations left him stunned. Cressida was not pregnant by him, but by another man, a playboy and poor man. She only wanted to use him to secure the future of her unborn child. Cressida and her parents had discussed this matter very carefully, and it was all a drama set up to force him to marry her. Every word in that conversation was like a knife stabbing into Theron's heart. He had never faced such deception and betrayal in his life. His long-standing doubts were finally answered, but that did not make him feel any better. On the contrary, it only made him feel resentful and stuck. He had been blatantly deceived, and if he did nothing, he would have to face a loveless marriage, forced into a situation he did not want. But Theron also knew that confronting Cressida and her family was not simple. They had prepared everything too carefully, and if he didn't have enough evidence or support, things might get worse. He needed to find a way to expose this truth to the public before it was too late. But did he have the courage and strength to do it? Thoughts swirled in Theron's head. He knew he couldn't bear it any longer, but was there any way to escape this nightmare without paying too high a price? As time passed, Theron and Cressida's wedding day drew closer and closer. While everything seemed to be going perfectly according to Cressida's wishes, Theron's mood became more and more depressed. What he heard from the recording device left him in a state of complete confusion. He could not escape the elaborate plan of Cressida and her family, but he could not continue to pretend that nothing had happened. The day before the wedding, Theron left the company in a state of utter confusion. He drove through familiar streets, but his mind was completely occupied with thoughts of the uncertain future. Images of Cressida, the approaching wedding, and the truth about the pregnancy not being as kept swirling in his head. He felt as if the world was collapsing beneath his feet. The night wind blew through the car windows, but Theron barely felt it. He just wanted to run away from everything, but he didn't know where to start. The pressure from Cressida and her family made him feel suffocated, but the most terrifying thing was his own helplessness. Theron had never felt so weak. In a moment of distraction, Theron didn't see the car in front of him stop. In just a split second, he crashed into the back of the car, causing a serious accident. The strong impact sent Theron's car spinning on the road and crashing straight into the curb. Everything in front of his eyes went black, and Theron only heard the sound of broken glass before he completely lost consciousness. When Theron woke up, he found himself lying on a hospital bed. His body ached, and everything around him was white. His head was pounding, but when he tried to move, he realized that he was still alive. His first feeling was panic, not knowing what had happened. But when he saw the medical equipment around him, Theron gradually understood that he had been in an accident. While Theron was in the hospital recovering, his wedding with Cressida had to be postponed. Cressida's family, instead of worrying about his health, gathered together to discuss their future. They did not visit Theron, did not call to ask about his condition. Instead, they were only concerned about whether Theron could recover enough for the wedding to take place. Cressida, with a calculating smile on her face, frankly discussed with her parents that if Theron did not wake up, they would easily cancel the wedding. Everything would be over before it even started, and no one would be held responsible. However, what they did not expect was that this conversation was recorded. The recording device that Theron had installed earlier was still working, and Cressida's entire scheme was clearly recorded. Cressida even confessed that the baby in her womb was not Theron's, but that of a playboy with no future. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Theron's condition did not improve much. He was in a coma for many days, making everyone worry whether he would wake up and recover. The doctors tried their best, but everything seemed to depend on Theron's will to overcome this difficult time. He seemed to be stuck between the line of life and death, while Cressida's family only cared about their own interests. During the days when Theron was in a coma, there was someone who was always by his side, taking care of him wholeheartedly. That was Serafina. She was a young, beautiful nurse with bright eyes and a warm heart. Although she was just one of the nurses taking care of the patient to Theron, Serafina seemed to become the most important person during that dark time. She not only did the work of wiping his body, changing bandages, and checking his health regularly, but also spent time sitting by his bed, talking softly, hoping that one day Theron would wake up. Serafina had a gentleness that Theron had never felt from anyone else in his life. Her devotion and sincerity were not only shown through small actions, but also through the way she cared about every little detail about his health. She always made sure that Theron was as comfortable as possible, and often carefully adjusted the medical equipment around him. The day Theron opened his eyes, Serafina was standing beside him, preparing to check his vitals like every day. When his eyes slowly opened, the first thing he saw was her face. Surprise and joy were evident on Serafina's face as she saw her patient starting to wake up. Theron's eyes stared at her as if trying to grasp the world around him, and she responded with a gentle smile, reassuring him that everything would be fine. Theron couldn't say anything. His throat was dry and his voice seemed to be stifled by the pain throughout his body. But what he felt most clearly at this moment was not the pain, but Serafina's warm presence. She gently wiped away the sweat on his forehead and said in a deep voice, "Welcome back, Theron." "You've made it through." Those simple words brought Theron a sense of relief and safety. In that moment, he felt like he was no longer alone in this chaotic life. He knew that there was someone by his side caring for him not because of money, fame, or power, but simply because of her kindness and devotion. After waking up, Theron's recovery was quite slow. His body was weak after the accident, and the doctors warned that he needed time to fully recover. During that time, Serafina was always by his side, not only providing medical care but also emotional support. She helped him eat, exercise gently, and talked to him so that he would not feel lonely during the long days in the hospital. As time went on, Theron became more and more attracted to Serafina's gentleness and sincerity. She was unlike anyone he had ever met before. The women in Theron's life were often attracted to his wealth and success, but Serafina was completely different. She didn't care about his fame or fortune. Whenever Theron tried to talk about work or career, she just smiled and said that the most important thing was that he was healthy. Theron felt that his life had changed since having Serafina. She brought him comfort that he had never felt before, even in his previous relationships. More than just a nurse, Serafina seemed to become his companion in his most difficult days, helping him overcome his fears and worries about the future. Every moment she was by his side, every little action of hers made Theron realize that he had begun to have feelings for her. However, Theron still kept these feelings to himself. He did not dare to express his feelings, partly because he was afraid of disrupting Serafina's life, partly because he knew that he was still caught up in the vortex of his unwanted marriage with Cressida. But in the peaceful moments when Serafina was by his side, Theron felt much lighter. He was no longer haunted by Cressida's schemes and lies, but instead by moments filled with hope for a better future. As time passed, Theron gradually recovered and was informed by the doctor that he could return home. He felt happy that he was finally free from the hospital bed, but at the same time his heart was filled with anxiety. Theron knew that when he returned, he would have to face Cressida's family and everything he had tried to avoid during his time in the hospital. But no matter how worried he was, Theron could not forget the warm moments that Serafina had brought him. He felt that he was no longer alone, because now there was someone he truly cared about and wanted to protect. Serafina's presence rekindled the fire in his heart, giving him hope that life was still worth pursuing. As the day of his discharge approached, Theron decided that he had to do something. He could no longer live under the lies and coercion of Cressida and her family. He wanted to clear things up, but most of all, he wanted to live his own life with the person he truly loved. After a long stay in the hospital, Theron finally recovered and returned home. But the worry about his wedding to Cressida still weighed heavily on his heart. Her family immediately asked him to continue preparing for the wedding. Although his physical condition was better, Theron was more stressed than ever. Images of Cressida's deception and schemes kept appearing in his mind. One evening, Theron suddenly remembered the recording device he had installed in Cressida's house. With some anxiety, he turned it on and heard conversations he never expected. In the conversation with her parents, Cressida admitted that the pregnancy was not Theron's, but that of a poor playboy. Her whole family had conspired to force Theron into an unwanted marriage. Cressida's confession left Theron stunned and angry. A feeling of betrayal welled up in his heart, but at the same time he felt relieved that he had learned the whole truth. Now, he has no more doubts. With the recording in hand, Theron decides to go public with everything on the wedding day. Before making the final decision, Theron goes to see Serafina. During the conversation, he confesses everything he has been through, about Cressida's trap, about the pregnancy that was not his, and about how her family took advantage of him. He also shares the recording with Serafina, surprising her and making her feel deeply sympathetic to his pain. Theron tells Serafina that she is the only person he can trust and that he has loved her since the days she took care of him in the hospital. Serafina, after hearing the whole story, agrees to stay by his side and face the truth with him. She understands that Theron has been deceived and needs her help to get through this difficult time. With Serafina's support and the recording in hand, Theron decides to reveal the truth at the wedding, ending the marriage he was forced into. He is ready to face Cressida and her family, believing that he will regain his freedom and the right to live the life he truly wants. The wedding day finally arrived. The cathedral was filled with distinguished guests, business associates, and relatives from both families. Everyone was looking forward to a lavish wedding between a successful businessman like Theron and a charming bride like Cressida. No one could have imagined that a horrifying truth was about to be revealed right in this sacred place. Cressida appeared in a pure white wedding dress, with a gorgeous face made up and a bright smile on her lips. She looked perfect in everyone's eyes, like a happy bride preparing to enter a wealthy married life. But in Theron's heart, this was not a happy day. He no longer felt excited or happy about this wedding. His heart belonged to someone else, Serafina, and what was about to happen would completely change the situation. Before the ceremony officially began, Theron calmly stepped onto the podium and called everyone's attention. With a calm but determined expression, he asked permission to say a few words before the wedding ceremony. The entire church fell silent, all eyes on Theron, including Cressida, who began to feel uneasy at his seriousness. Theron gently walked to the church's sound system, looking around the hall. With a click, the sound from the recording device he had prepared earlier rang out, playing the entire conversation between Cressida and her family. Every word about the pregnancy that was not Theron's, about Cressida and her family's deceitful plan, all came out clearly through the speakers, echoing throughout the church. The entire hall was stunned, dead silent. Whispers began to rise everywhere. All eyes now turned from Theron to Cressida and her family. They looked at her with shock and discontent. Cressida, who had always been confident and gorgeous, now stood there, stunned, her face pale. Her family was no better, completely taken aback and unable to react to this undeniable evidence. The voice on the recording continued to play, further exposing the schemes of Cressida and her family. Theron stood there, calmly observing everyone's expressions, especially Cressida's. When the recording ended, he turned to look at her with determination in his eyes. "Cressida," Theron said, his voice firm but not angry, "I cannot marry you. The truth is clear. You lied to me, took advantage of the situation to force me to marry you. But today I will not let that happen." The whole church held its breath in anticipation. Cressida tried to keep calm, but could not say anything, her eyes showing panic. Her family looked at each other in confusion, not knowing how to salvage the situation. But Theron did not stop there. He turned to Serafina, who was standing silently in the corner of the church. Their eyes met, and in that moment Theron knew he had made the right decision. He walked over to Serafina, gently took her hand, and turned to face the rest of the guests. "I have found someone I truly love," Theron said, his voice full of emotion. "Someone who has always been there for me in my most difficult times. This is the woman I want to share my life with, not out of obligation, but out of true love." Serafina bowed her head, moved but said nothing. The church erupted in whispers, but Theron did not care. He had decided to end things here. There was nothing more to hide or fear. His life would now take a different direction, and he was ready to face it all. Cressida stood there, unable to hide her anger and despair. She tried to explain, but no one believed her excuses anymore. The whole church now knew the truth, and angry eyes turned to her family. Theron grabbed Serafina's hand and led her out of the church, leaving behind the intrigue and lies. He had finally found his own life again, and he knew that from now on he would live with the love and sincerity he truly deserved. After Theron and Serafina left the church, the story of Cressida and her family's fraud quickly spread throughout the city. The public was shocked by the truth being exposed and talked about it. Cressida's family became the target of criticism, facing both social and legal consequences. Theron, with clear recording evidence, decided to take the case to court to seek justice. The case was thoroughly investigated, and Cressida could not deny her deceitful scheme. Her family was convicted of fraud and had to pay $5,000 in compensation, not a large amount, but the shock to her honor and reputation was immeasurable. Cressida, once ambitious, now lost everything: her career, honor, and the trust of the community. She was fired from Theron's company, and no one wanted to be associated with her again. Meanwhile, Theron felt relieved to finally escape Cressida's trap. Not only did he avoid a false marriage, he also found true love with Serafina, who was with him in the most difficult times. Both decided to start over, building a new life not only with love but also with mutual respect. Theron and Serafina focused on being true to their feelings, staying away from the glitz, and focusing on a simple, sincere life. Every day that passed, Theron felt happy to have found Serafina and had a true life, not forced or lied. Finally, the challenges opened a new chapter in Theron's life. From being trapped in a false plan, he bravely exposed the truth and regained his freedom. More importantly, he found Serafina, the woman he truly loved, and was willing to overcome all the difficulties in life ahead.